Hi, thanks for coming back to What the Fish with me, Bobby. If you're wondering why this tank behind me is dark, it's because these guys are in mourning for the multitudes of fish that have been lost over the last couple days out in the fish room. Disaster has struck, and we have reached complete and total system failure outside in the fish room this week. It is not a pretty sight. I wasn't going to post about this, but then I decided that if you're going to post about fish, there's good things that happen and there's bad things that happen. So we might as well work through it and be a little cathartic and talk to some of my friends like you guys out there about what's going on in the fish room right now, because it isn't pretty. So come on, let's take a walk out there. Let me show you what happened that led to the system failure, what improvements I'm hoping to be able to put in place, and how we're going to get this thing back up and running, because what the fish, man, this is not a happy video. All right, guys, here we are outside in the fish room, which is in my garage, and I must remind you that I am coming to you from Phoenix, Arizona in May, where it is hot, although not as hot as it could be. We caught a break, started out the week with Sunday and Monday at 109 and 107, I think, which is kind of unusually warm for this time of year. Luckily, over the last couple days, we've dropped into the high 90s, which is huge for me. The reason it's huge for me is because being in my garage, I need to do everything I can to make sure I keep my room cool. Normally, that's not a problem. I use fans, I use a swamp cooler, things continue to go well. However, if you take a look up behind me, you'll see that there is one thing conspicuously missing from that shelf, as well as the sound of bubbling water that you normally hear in a fish room, which is currently not going on. The reason for that is, on Tuesday, my linear piston pump that has been running for the last 5 years died, killing the air to all of my tanks. It runs my entire room. And so for the last couple of days, I've had no air to anything. I have been doing water changes like crazy. I have used some air pumps that I've had laying around to keep some of the more needful tanks, I guess you could say, in good operation. But I am getting kind of worried because so far nobody has been gasping for air, but tanks are getting cloudy very quickly. Power heads moving water is not really keeping up with things as easily as I would like. And I'll give you a shot of the thermometer. It is 91 degrees in here, which means that air needs to be running. So what happened? What happened was the pump doing very well for the last 4 years. I did notice though that air was really slowing down. So I went through, made sure that none of my valves were clogged, which most of them seemed fine. And over the last week, the air output from the pump has just gone continuously lower and lower and lower, until finally it was running 1 out of 20 something tanks on Tuesday. That's when I got the bright idea to take it apart. I think I did more damage than I did good doing that, because I broke a few things and now it's not working at all. So let me give you a quick view of what's going on in here, and then let's talk about what's the plan. All right, as you can see, the temperature in this room is currently hovering around 92 degrees. That's actually good. It's not usually a problem to be this warm in here. If I have the temperature in this room in the low 90s, most of the fish are completely happy. Water temperatures are kept down to about 80 or so, especially when tanks are running with air. But as you can see, there is no air to any of these tanks, and they are starting to cloud a little bit. I have been doing water changes like crazy. Some of my tanks, like this Pygmy Quarry tank, have some pumps which have been circulating water to keep things moving a little bit. I've done the same thing to my pleco tanks. We gotta make sure that the plecos are, well, we gotta make sure that the plecos are doing well, and we have some expensive plecos in here, and so far the pumps are recirculating water and keeping things oxygenated, so that's good. These guys like high flow anyway, so their pumps normally are running like that, but again, there's nothing coming out of the airlines. I did lose a lot of super red bristlenose babies. I had baby fish and eggs kind of scattered all over the bottom, and the only thing I can assume here is that the oxygen level in this tank dropped very low very quickly, probably because there were a lot of fish in it. Plecos are extremely messy to begin with, and the food that you normally keep in a pleco tank fouls the water very, very quickly. So with a few water changes and a air pump that I plugged in, I managed to save what's left, but I did lose a lot of babies. The good thing is, the day before this happened, I literally scooped out a whole bunch of baby fish and dropped them into my grow out tank. The grow out tank hasn't had too many problems. I haven't lost any baby fish from here, so the bulk of the fish that I had bred that were ready to come up seemed to be doing okay. It was all the newly hatched and the eggs that I ended up losing. So that's what happened to the bushy nose. But hopefully they're going to be doing fine. We do have some EBA fry that are still doing really well. Because of the temperature and because the water flow is down to 0 in most of these tanks, algae is starting to really get a grip, as well as cloudiness on the water. But I've been doing water changes like crazy, and hopefully that keeps things going. The good news is the new pump is going to be arriving tomorrow. I spoke to Gemco, and if any of you have fish rooms that are powered by a pressurized air system and you need a pump or valves or any other supply to keep your room going, I cannot recommend Gemco enough. They will bend over backwards whether you are ordering the first time from them or if you are repeat and, like me, need some help. These guys are amazing. They did everything they could to help me try and repair the pump that I had. Wasn't going to work, wasn't going to happen. And they're getting one out here to me as quickly as possible. So I did order a larger size piston pump just because I felt like I might need a little bit more air, and I wanted to have a pump big enough to run what I want to do to the room. So that should be getting here tomorrow. I'm going to make some improvements to the room. The biggest one is that the pump lives up here on this shelf. Now, you always want to keep your air pump above water level in case you lose power. You don't want water siphoning back into the pump and ruining it on you. But because it's in the garage and because summer gets really hot here, I'm assuming that the air up in the ceiling is probably 5 to 10 degrees warmer than it is down here in the fish room proper. So I plan on putting a hole in the wall. My laundry room is on the other side of this wall, and I'll be running the pipe through that hole into the laundry room, and then that way the air pump will be operating in a much cooler environment and hopefully pumping cooler air into the tanks, which may even help things stay a little bit more stable, a little bit easier. So I'll walk you through that when it happens tomorrow. Of course, as anyone who's sharing a house with a spouse knows, the last thing I'm going to do is tell him that I'm punching a hole in the wall. Always do these things first and then ask for forgiveness later. Otherwise, you're never going to get your way. So, you know, marital bliss. But here we are. Hopefully we can get this back up and running soon, because I don't like the way that it's looking. I mean, it was spotless and pristine over the weekend, and it already looks just like crap. And it's all because these pumps are not running. So keeping my fingers crossed till tomorrow. I'll be back with an update. We'll get the new pump up, we'll get it running. I'll show you what it is, what it's like, and maybe even do a quick tour of how to set up a pressurized system, because they are still the way to go. But if your pump dies, that is the heart of your tank, and you can be in a bit of trouble. So stay tuned. Next video coming very soon. We'll get this thing up and running, get these fish back to normal, and hopefully get everything back on track. But right now, it's just not a very happy day in the fish room. A quick note, if you're wondering what do I normally do when the temperature outside is like 110, 115 or higher, which sometimes does happen in the summertime, I do run a swamp cooler in here. This is a 3-car garage, and the back end is where the fish are in the fish room. This swamp cooler, combined with some cheap pumps, or I'm sorry, some cheap fans that I bought off of Amazon, can keep the temperature in this room and in the water well into the area that it needs to be, so below 82 degrees or so, and everything's fine. But you got to have that air in the tank. It's a must have for filtration, aeration, and oxygen levels. So if you're in Phoenix, yeah, you're going to need a swamp cooler if you're doing this outside.